on Psalm 34. And just by way of review from what we've been looking at to this point in these classes, next week is the last, wait a minute. Isn't there, there's a December 31st, isn't there? Isn't there? Oh my, what are we going to do? So we have like 14 classes? Is that for real? Wow, okay, so this is like really interesting. So what we'll do then is I'll figure out a way to make this into 14 classes, unless Joey, do we have anything planned next Sunday morning or 2 Sunday mornings from now? Okay, we'll just do another Psalms class, so we'll do 14 then. I'll figure out a way to, since we're not going to be covering all of them today, I'll make it work, all right? That's just a big revelation to me. All right, so the book of Psalms is broken up into 5 books, and there's different themes that you can trace through these 5 books, generally speaking. And so book 1 follows a lot of themes of Genesis. We've seen some things about creation. We've seen things that relate to faith is the way that you connect with God. And people have done lots of deep research on the specific Psalms and how they trace these kinds of themes. That's not really the purpose of what we're doing in these classes right now. But book 2 follows themes of Exodus, and then Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, so on and so forth, is one way that you can think about these Psalms. But for today, we're going to begin in Psalm 34, and this is dealing with David's deliverance. Let's look at this summary. This is another acrostic psalm. Can anybody remind us what an acrostic psalm is? Yeah, each line starts with the next letter of the alphabet. And so this is another one of, I think there's 7 of them in the book of Psalms. So it's when David was running from Saul, he pretended to be crazy. This psalm was written to thank God for deliverance as the Lord saved David from all his troubles. And one way that you could outline this is verses 1 through 10, David is saying he's going to bless the Lord, and then 11 through 22, I'm going to then teach other people to do the same thing. So let's go ahead and read Psalm 34. And this is one of the few psalms that has a historical heading to it. So look at the heading of this. Psalm of David when he changed his behavior before Abimelech so that he drove him out and went away. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be on my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look at him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him, and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. O fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is there who desires life and loves many days, that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears toward their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them from the earth. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. Affliction will slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the life of his servants. None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. All right. So as we start looking at Psalm 34, there is a debate about this psalm. David, he pretended to be crazy in front of Abimelech to save his life. And a lot of people look at that period of time in David's life around 1 Samuel 21. That should be 1 Samuel 21, 10 through 15. And he doesn't seem to be acting by faith in these chapters. And so for him to feign madness and act like somebody he wasn't, but then God still to deliver him at that time, seems like David might be writing this as a way of repenting for the way he acted, but thanking God for the deliverance he still gave him. And so with that kind of as a backdrop, let's start with the first question here. What do you guys notice from this psalm? Yeah, okay, good. So we actually know when this one was written, and so that it's good to get that historical background. Interesting to see that. What else do you guys notice here? Yeah.
Those who look on him are radiant. Their faces are not covered with shame. So sometimes you'll notice people's faces, the affect of their face. Sometimes you can see joy in it. Sometimes you
Yeah.
can see sorrow. And you would be able to see shame as well, I think.
Yeah, good, good. What else? Yeah, in verse 7, when he talks about the angel of the Lord, the Lord uses angels to be ministers to God's people. And that opens up a whole other thing. In Revelation 2 and 3, remember the letters to the 7 churches of Asia? Each one begins by saying, to the angel of the church at Ephesus. Does every church have an angel? Kind of seems like it in Revelation 2 and 3 at least. Does it seem like in Daniel 10, if you can go back in your memory bank and think about Daniel 10, that nations have angels that are at war with each other in the spiritual realm? Seems like it. But whenever I was in California, there was a woman that Samantha and I taught that was in the Navy, and she did intel work. And that's back when people were really scared of terrorism. You ever notice how every few years we get scared of new things? We've been scared of COVID, and now we're scared of the economy. So there's new things to be scared of all the time. So remember back to the days when everybody was scared of terrorism. And I had asked her one time, how many threats does San Diego by itself get every day from terror threats and people like that? And she said, if I told you, you guys would all lose your mind. But we can't tell you that kind of information because we're in the intel work and that's all classified information. But you guys would all lose your minds if you knew all the stuff that we know. So is it comforting knowing that people like that exist and are doing things to try to help us? Yes. Do we need to know everything they do in order to get that comfort? No. I look at angels the same way. They're doing things in the spiritual realm. We will not interact with them or see them or anything like that, but they exist and they're doing things for God's people. Good. What else do you guys notice from this? Yeah.
Verse 13 feels ironic.
Yeah. You look at some of these verses, like the Lord laughs at the wicked for he sees that his day is coming. Oh, wait, no, I'm in the wrong psalm. Verse 13. Keep your tongue from evil. Yeah, and this would be one of the reasons why both of those verses would have worked. Keep your tongue from evil. Didn't he just speak deceit to Abimelech by acting like somebody he wasn't? And this is why people have looked at the heading of Psalm 34 and said, well, the headings are not inspired, but we already saw Psalm 18 matches 2 Samuel 22, and so they are inspired, it seems. But I think David is writing this to say, when I was speaking deceit, I was not satisfied with my life. God still delivered me, but I've learned from this situation, I think is what he's saying. But very good observation. Anything else that you guys see here? I thought in verse 2, when he talks about boasting in the Lord, you realize so many emotions that we have are inherently okay, but sin distorts them. Is anger ever okay? Is jealousy ever okay? Yeah, Paul has a divine jealousy for the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians. What other emotions would there be that we oftentimes associate with just being negative? Fear. Yeah, fearing the Lord would be one. Yeah, Joey?
Verse 4, he says, I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Too many times we let our fears paralyze us.
Yes.
Fears just drag us away from
Yes, and if we fear the Lord, that's the fear that does give us security. But if we fear things in the world, then we have insecurity. So good. All right. So boasting in the Lord. It's okay to boast, but boast in the Lord and what He's done for you and who He is. Verse 8, if you look down at verse 8, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in Him." How do you know that the Lord is good? How do you start to figure that out?
Study His word, you see His blessings, you pray earnestly to Him, and He answers your prayers, you know.
Yeah, and in verse 8, you taste that the Lord is good. If you've never tasted, so if you go to Sam's Club, like the kids really like going to Sam's Club whenever they get like the free lunch hour with all the samples. And so have you ever gone to a place like that and they gave you a sample of something and you tasted it and then you bought it? Why are samples like that such a powerful thing to do at a store like that? Well, if you taste it, then you know it's good. You're not just kind of guessing by looking at the box. The only way that you can know if the Lord is good is if you've put some work into tasting and studying and learning and looking at it for yourself. Otherwise, you're never going to really know. And so it's almost like David is saying in this passage, like inviting people to do the same thing. In verses 12 to 14, it's so interesting to me how he begins by saying, "What man is there who desires life and loves many good days that he may see good?" How many of you desires to love life and see good days? Everybody here wants that. And the way that you do that in verses 12 through 14, how do you do it in verses 13 and 14? Yeah, okay, so I remember when I was a new Christian and I was in a Bible study, and 1 Peter quotes a lot from Psalm 34. And when the teacher was going through 1 Peter 3, where this passage is quoted, he said, okay, like if we want to love life and see good days and everything like that, this is the instruction. And I remember I had been a Christian for maybe like 7 months or something, and I looked at the passage and I looked at the teacher. I said, it's got to be more complicated than that. So if I want to enjoy life, I have to keep my tongue from evil. Now, but start thinking about it. How often have you done something dumb with your tongue? You said something you shouldn't have said, and it brought all kinds of turmoil. If you could just get that under control, do you think you'd start enjoying life a little bit more? What about your lips from speaking deceit? You remember all those times that you've lied to people and you didn't remember what it was that you said to that person, and now you got to make up another lie because you think you're trying to remember the right lie. If you just remember the truth and you say that in every situation, you're going to be a lot better off. But how much trouble has it brought into your life when you've been lying to people? What about in verse 14? Turn away from evil. Think about all the times in your life that you've done something evil. And your conscience hurt you, and you were afraid of being around godly people because you were afraid that they were going to say something to you about it, or maybe they figured it out in one way or another. Seek peace and pursue it. This is what David says. If you want to enjoy life and see good days, and it's really that simple in this passage. Of course, this is all under the idea that you're following the Lord, and God is at the center of all of this. But to me, those instructions are just shockingly simple. Anything else that you guys want to show by way of observation here?
When it says, "Oh, taste and see the Lord is good," this is the result of you consuming the Lord being good, and this is the fruit of that.
Yes.
That you will seek peace and ensue it, and you won't speak evil, and when you do, you will make the adjustment and corrections to be in line with what God wants you to be.
Yep, good. I thought in verse 19, when he says, many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers them out of them all. Righteous people are not exempt from afflictions, but what they are promised is that God is going to help you through them. So, all right, let's go to the next question. What do you wonder from this psalm? What questions did you have from this? Yeah.
Is that a prophecy?
Yeah, in verse 20, he keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. It sounds like the Passover lamb instructions in Exodus 12. It sounds like what happens with Jesus in John chapter 19. And John chapter 19 makes a big deal about none of Jesus' bones being broken. Is this a prophecy? Good question. When David is saying this, I don't think that he's in some kind of trance going, and one day the Messiah will come and none of his bones will be broken, and then he gets out of that, and in verse 21, he keeps going back to what he was talking about. I think this is his way of saying the Lord protects the righteous. He doesn't even let their bones break. And what happens when Jesus is on the cross is it's borrowing this kind of imagery, it's borrowing imagery from the Passover, and it's applying it in a fuller extent in Christ. But that's a good question. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you was talking about chapter 14 and the Hebrew tongue from evil and your lips are speaking deceitful, verse 1 says, I'll bless the Lord at all times.
Yes.
And his praise shall be continually in my mouth. If you're praising the Lord constantly, you won't have deceit from your tongue.
Right. Yeah, and again, I think this is where this psalm is a psalm of repentance from how he acted. God still delivered him, but now he's learned through that. Have you ever had a situation where things ended up working out okay, but you didn't handle it the right way the whole way through? And you could still learn from that experience. I think that's what Psalm 34 is. All right, let's go to the next question then. Anything you guys are reminded of in this? Of angels protecting people? Yeah, in Hebrews 1:14, angels are ministering spirits sent out to serve those who are going to inherit eternal life. You got other passages in the Bible. Do you remember when the Assyrians were surrounding Jerusalem and God sends one angel to kill 185,000 Assyrians in one night? And so you're reminded of other passages that bring up angels and their protection of people. I think I was reminded of when David denied his identity, Peter did the same thing. Remember when Peter was he was kind of outside the Sanhedrin Council, and people were asking him, who are you? And aren't you connected to Jesus? And he was denying his identity, and he was acting kind of crazy before those people. Can you see why this psalm would mean a lot to Peter? Peter quotes Psalm 34 several times in the book of 1 Peter. And so I wonder how much Peter was thinking about some of those things when he was quoting from this. We already talked about verse 20, the bones not being broken. John 19 brings up that idea. Verses 8 through 14 to me sound like Proverbs, where he's giving instructions to people, things like that. So anything else that you guys are reminded of from this psalm? All right, let's. Anything you guys thought of for prayers that you can make from Psalm 34? Yeah, good. Help us to taste that the Lord is good and not want anything else. Good. What else? Yeah, help us to teach other people. Give us opportunities to teach other people, like he starts out in verse 11. Yeah, like going back to verses 12 through 14, help me to love many good days by doing the things that verses 13 and 14 say. And we had verse 11, provide opportunities to teach the next generation. Anything else you guys want to say about that? All right. Let's go to Psalm 35 then. In Psalm 35, David is attacked without cause. We've seen other Psalms where David is being accused of things that are not true. And so we get another one like this. The summary, David pleads with the Lord to defend him from those who without cause seek to destroy him. David anticipates rescue leading to praise for the Lord. And so the outline of this, in verses 1 through 10, he talks about the attackers, and then 11 through 28, he talks about accusers. So one way you can think about this is like verses 1 through 10, he's being physically attacked. 11 through 28, this is what people are saying about me, is one way to think about this. But let's read Psalm 35. It's one of the longer ones, and then we'll ask the same questions that we've been asking. Contend, O Lord, with those who contend with me. Fight against those who fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler and rise for my help. Draw the spear and javelin against my pursuers. Say to my soul, I am your salvation. Let them be put to shame and dishonor who seek after my life. Let them be turned back and disappointed who devise evil against me. Let them be like chaff before the wind, with the angel of the Lord driving them away. Notice that we've got the angel brought up again here. In verse 6, let their way be dark and slippery, and the angel of the Lord pursuing them. For without cause they hid their net for me. Without cause they dug a pit for my life. Let destruction come upon him when he does not know it, and let the net that he has hid ensnare him. Let him fall into it to his destruction. Then my soul will rejoice in the Lord, exulting in his salvation. All my bones shall say, O Lord, who is like you, delivering the poor from him who is too strong for him, the poor and needy from him who robs him. Malicious witnesses rise up. They ask me of things that I do not know. They repay me evil for good. My soul is bereft. But when they were sick, I wore sackcloth. I afflicted myself with fasting. I prayed with my head bowed on my chest. I went about as though I grieved for my friend or my brother. As one who laments his mother, I bowed down in mourning. But at my stumbling they rejoiced and gathered. They gathered together against me, wretches whom I do not know, tore at me without ceasing. Like profane mockers at a feast, they gnash at me with their teeth. How long, O Lord, will you look on? Rescue me from their destruction, my precious life from the lions. I will thank you in the great congregation, in the mighty throng I will praise you. Let not those rejoice over me who are wrongfully my foes. Let not those who wink the eye, who hate me without cause. For they do not speak peace, but against those who are quiet in the land, they devise words of deceit. They open wide their mouths against me. They say, Aha, aha, our eyes have seen it. You have seen, O Lord. Be not silent, O Lord. Be not far from me. Awake and rouse yourself for my vindication. For my cause, my God and my Lord, vindicate me, O Lord my God, according to your righteousness. Let him not rejoice over me. Let them not say in their hearts, Aha, our heart's desire. Let them not say, We have swallowed him up. Let them be put to shame and disappointed altogether, who rejoice at my calamity. Let them be clothed with shame and dishonor, who magnify themselves against me. Let those who delight in my righteousness shout for joy and be glad, and say evermore, Great is the Lord, who delights in the welfare of his servant. Then my tongue shall tell of your righteousness and of your praise all day long. All right. What do you guys notice from this psalm? Did you? Oh, okay.
Evil people are glad when we make mistakes.
Yeah, evil people are glad when we make mistakes. Have you ever seen that happen before, like in the workplace or something, where somebody knows that you're a Christian and you're trying to do the right thing, and when they finally see you mess up, they just get really happy to see that. Probably because your example makes them feel guilty, and if you can get to their level every now and then it makes them feel like, oh, I'm not as bad as I thought I was, or something like that. But yeah, that's what's happening here in this psalm. What else? Yeah. Yes. Yes, good. This goes back to the whole concept of waiting on the Lord. You guys remember the components of waiting on the Lord? You want something that's good, but you don't have it right now. And the temptation that we have in those situations is to take matters into our own hands and manipulate things to get what we want, justifying sin in the process. David's not doing that. He's trusting in the Lord to take care of this situation. In fact, at the beginning and towards the end of this psalm, David talks about this legal defense that he wants from the Lord. Contend, O Lord, with those who contend with me. And then in verse 23, awake and arouse yourself for my vindication, for my cause, my God, my Lord. He's asking the Lord to take care of this situation, and he's not going to do it himself. What else do you guys notice here? Yes. Let them be turned back and disappointed who devise evil against me at the end of verse 4. Let them be like chaff before the wind. That goes back to Psalm 1 about the wicked being like chaff. But this goes to that idea in the Bible of lex talionis. You guys know what that means? In the Old Testament, there's this concept of lex talionis. That's the Hebrew term for it, where eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. What one person has done to you in an ungodly way, let it be done back to them. And so this is one of the themes that we've seen in the book of Psalms, that when wicked people do wicked things, it backfires on them. False accusations backfire on people. Their attempts to try to destroy David are going to backfire on them. And it's because the Lord, I like in verses 2 and 3, in verse 2, God is a, I got this backwards on here. It should be in verse 2, God is a defensive weapon, and in verse 3, God is an offensive weapon. A shield is a defense, and offense is the spear in verse 3. Whether it be David's defense or offense, the Lord is the one that's taking care of his situation. By the way, the imagery of a shield is interesting to think about. Instead of you getting struck with a arrow or a sword, what gets struck instead? The shield. Isn't that sort of a picture of Jesus and what he's done for us? The shield gets struck. We're the ones who are delivered and saved. And so David will bring this up in several of the Psalms where he brings up first the defense or the offense and then switches to the other side, and how God is both of those things for him. Notice also in verse 7 and in verse 19, it uses the phrase without cause 3 times in this psalm. In verse 7, for without cause they hid their net for me. Without cause they dug a pit for my life. And then at the end of verse 19, these people hate me without cause. Now, do you think that the people who hate David do you think they would say that they didn't have a cause? They would have said that they had a cause. So what does David mean by saying this? Yeah, without good cause or without righteous cause would be the idea. Again, we've looked at so many Psalms, and David's writing all the Psalms in Book 1. How many times was he mistreated by people? A lot. Well, wasn't he a man after God's own heart? Can people who are sincerely seeking the Lord and trying to do what the Lord wants them to do, will they be mistreated and misunderstood and accused of things? Yes, we see that all throughout these Psalms. Did you have something, Daryl? Yes. Yes. Good. Absolutely. Yep. Good. What else do you guys notice here? I think in verse 27, he talks about how vindication will eventually come. Let those who delight in my righteousness shout for joy and be glad and say evermore, great is the Lord who delights in the welfare of his servant. Like everybody's going to come in verse 27 to recognize that David was in the right. It goes back to that idea in 2 Timothy chapter 3 about these wicked believers, these false believers. They will not get very far. That they might have a little bit of time where it seems like what they're doing is really successful, but it will not last forever. And so David is reminding himself of that. I like in verses 21 and 22 the contrast of the eyewitnesses. In verse 21, they open wide their mouths against me. They say, aha, aha, our eyes have seen it. Like, oh yeah, David, we saw you do this, or we saw you do that, or we heard you say this or that, would be kind of the idea. But then in verse 22, you have seen, O Lord. Be not silent, O Lord, be not far from me. If you've ever had people accusing you of things that weren't true, verses 21 and 22 are great. Like David is acknowledging, yeah, they're saying this about me, but you, O Lord, know the truth. You know what's actually happening, and you'll vindicate me. All right, let's go to the next question. What do you wonder from this psalm? Yeah. That's a good question and good observation. And if you look at verse 12, they repay me evil for good. My soul is bereft. So he goes like to plural, to singular, to plural again, and he's talking about people that he's done good things for. And so is it an individual? Is it somebody that's like a ringleader to all of this and influencing other people to do the same kind of thing? Seems like that's sort of what's going on. And so David was, it seems like, betrayed by somebody that he had some kind of confidence and trust in. And what he's doing in verse 13, this brings up the question. You don't see this all over the place in Psalms, but look at verse 13. But when they were sick, I wore sackcloth, I afflicted myself with fasting. I prayed with head bowed on my chest. I went about as though I grieved for a friend of my brother, so on and so forth. When should I consider fasting? Jesus talks about fasting in Matthew chapter 6. Does anybody know the one day in the Old Testament where the Israelites were commanded to fast? It was the Day of Atonement. The one day out of the year they were actually commanded to. So if David, is verse 13 the Day of Atonement? Is that why he's fasting? No, fasting is an optional thing for Christians when their life circumstances make sense to do it then. What would be some reasons to fast? And we can start with this text, by the way. Why is David fasting? Yeah, friend is sick. He's being betrayed by people. His fasting in verse 13 seems to be enhancing his prayers. It's helping him focus in on his prayers more effectively. Why else would fasting be appropriate?
Here he says, I humbled myself.
Yeah, yours says he humbled himself. The term that's oftentimes used in the Old Testament for fasting is afflicted myself. You know what's interesting is there's a lot more talk in our culture right now about like intermittent fasting, and fasting is good for your health, and like there's all of a sudden people really interested in fasting when the Lord had talked about it like for religious reasons a long time ago. Would you only be interested in doing this if you knew that it also had a health benefit? I see a lot of people interested in it now when the Bible had passages like this all along. Fasting, one of the things that it does, it's abstaining from food for a period of time. When I was in California, I did a sermon on fasting because people just don't talk about it very much, and I wanted to dig into it. Most of the time in the Bible, fasting is skipping breakfast, skipping lunch, but having dinner. Like we think about people that, like the Apostle Paul or Jesus who fasted for 40 days, and we go, I could never ever do that. But that's not what most fasting in the Bible was. It was early on a Sunday morning, 4 a.m., when Samantha had a miscarriage with a kid between Asher and Abigail. And I woke up around 4 a.m., and Samantha was in the living room, and she was just laying down, and she had given birth to our miscarried child. And that Sunday morning, I was already going to be preaching on Elijah raising the widow's son. And so that was the sermon. It was printed out, ready to go. That's what I was going to preach. And I had to get through that sermon that same morning. And we didn't have breakfast that day. We didn't have lunch, but we had dinner. There's something powerful about letting your body feel affliction at the same time that your emotions feel affliction. Because your body gets in tune with your feelings, and it helps you process things. This is what David is doing in his circumstance that involves suffering and trial and trauma. Can you think of any times in the New Testament when Christians fasted? It's not just when there's trial and trauma in your life, when it would be appropriate to do it. Remember in Acts 14, I think it is, that when the churches were establishing elders, the Christians were fasting to do that, to focus in on their prayers. Again, it's an optional thing. It's something that you can choose to do if you want to enhance your prayers, things like that, if there's something that you really feel like you need extra attention on in the moment. But how did Jesus tell people to fast in Matthew 6? Don't let other people know. He's not saying, oh, walk around like, oh, I'm just so hungry because I'm so holy. Don't do that. Just make it so people don't even know that you're doing it. Because this is between you and God, right? Right? So why are you letting everybody know? Okay, all right. So anything else you guys want to say about what you wonder from this psalm? Yeah.
One thing about fasting, God calls us to use wisdom. Is some people that's diabetic.
Right.
You can't be doing that for a long extent of time, or else you're going to put yourself in jeopardy. So
Right.
we got to walk in wisdom.
Right. And I think those would be some of the reasons why maybe there's not like a blanket statement that you do it all the time or whatever. By the way, the Pharisees, they fasted twice a week according to Luke 18. And depending on which groups it was, whatever, it was either every Monday and Thursday or every Tuesday and Friday. And was Jesus fasting like that? No, he got accused of being less religious than all the other people in that day when he was just trying to do what the Lord wanted him to do. One of the problems with rote religion is every Monday and every Thursday just a really traumatic day, and that's why we fast on both of these days. No, it's got to be circumstantial. Real religion looks at what's really happening in your life and in the world and properly reacts to those things. And so, I know that the whole point of this is not to talk about fasting. David brings it up, though. And so it brings up a lot of other passages that would go to that, which goes to the next question. What are you reminded of from this psalm? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah, he knows things are going to change, I think. So he could be saying, when it all changes and I'm in a better place, then we'll go do this together. Or either way, he's saying, I know things are going to change. It's like in Philippians 4 where it talks about praying to the Lord with thanksgiving. Before the prayer's even answered, you're thanking God? What? Well, that's what David is doing here in this psalm. Those are good cross-references. I'm reminded of the theme of righteous sufferers, Joseph, Moses, Jesus. How many other people in the Bible suffered without cause? How many righteous people were mistreated by people? And if you're going to be one of those people that suffer, it's like what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you falsely on my account, for so they treated the prophets who were before you. Look at the people that you're accompanied with when you're suffering for the right thing. The chaff, we already talked about the chaff in verse 5, reminds you of Psalm 1. The cry of how long, like Wes just brought up, is used in other places. How many righteous people have to ask the question, how long, O Lord? Because there's a lot of wicked things. There's a lot of things that don't make sense. How long are you going to let this happen? And is it okay to pray and cry out to the Lord like this? Yes. Anything else that you're reminded of here? Yeah.
You remind me of the lives of Jeremiah and Ezekiel.
Yes.
One was put down in the cistern and made this, was afflicted all through his ministry, and the other had a much easier life. And you ask the question, which one does God prefer? Well, God used both of them, but He used them in different ways.
Yep.
They had to go through different things. You can't look at somebody's circumstances and say, well, they're being blessed by God just because they're being having material blessings.
Right.
You can't. That's not the way you make those kind of determinations.
Yep. Good. Good. Anything else? All right. What prayers can we make from this psalm?
Just that the Lord sees what's going on in the world, just knowing that He does, and praying that we're aware of it.
Yeah. Good. Good. What else? I know. Yeah, like this is when we're looking at these psalms and think like I hope that the discipline of what we've been doing in these classes of asking these 4 questions affects the way that you guys study. That you're trying to notice more things. You're trying to ask more questions of the text. You're trying to link it with other things in the Bible and stories from your own life and so on and so forth. But if you read any books that deal with how to study the Bible, one of the things that they'll always say is that it's got to apply to your life. It's got to apply to your life. To me, an instinctive way of knowing how a passage applies to your life is to turn it into a prayer. When you flip that switch in your mind and you ask yourself, what prayer can I make from this psalm? Suddenly, you're knowing what you should be requesting from a passage. And in your own personal Bible studies, this is such an important step to make sure that we're trying to get these ideas into our heart. But you can take these psalms and just verbatim pray them before the Lord and make them your own. Some of the ones that I have from this, help me to not take vengeance into my own hands, but trust in your vindication. And then, like we just said in verse 10, pray verbatim. Did you know that verbate is a word? To verbate something is the verb of saying something back. So that's an interesting thing that you guys just learned. But like to say, all my bones shall say, O Lord, who is like you, delivering the poor from him who is too strong for him, the poor and the needy from him who robs him. Just taking any of these things and just verbating them back to the Lord in your own prayer is a good discipline. So, all right. Anything else you guys want to say about that? Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, the idea of forgiving other people, help me to forgive these people, good. All right, so because we have one more class than I thought we did, we only did 2 psalms today, and I'm going to rearrange how we do the last several, but that's good for today. Let's go ahead and pray based on some of the things that we've looked at from these psalms. O righteous Lord, there can be so many times in our life where because we're trying to do the right thing, people will mistreat us. And in situations, Lord, we might not always handle things the right way, but we pray that we would learn from those mistakes that we've made, that we would learn from the ways that we have not fully followed you. Help us, Father, to be on the track that is pleasing to you. Help us to be people that taste and see that you are good. Help us to desire nothing but you. Help us to get more and more of a taste of you every day and to think about you above everything else. Father, when we are mistreated for doing the right thing, we pray that we would wait on you, that we wouldn't take vengeance into our own hands, but that we would trust in you to take care of the situation. Thank you so much for being our God. Please be our shield and our buckler. Please be our offense and our defense. Thank you for this time together, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.